In the first year of Darius, Daniel had a vision. Gabriel came to him and told him about the 70 weeks. In the very next chapter, a few years have come by. This is now the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia, possibly 4 years from chapter 9 to chapter 10. And Daniel has another vision. He is visited by a heavenly personage. This chapter 10 is most important in the sequence of events. Gary Stearman is here to discuss with me the vision of the glory of God.
Yes, indeed. And this vision, J.R., is often used as an illustration of prayer. That is to say, Daniel goes into fasting and prayer for 21 days at the beginning of this chapter. And in response to that, he is visited by a heavenly messenger. And often it is said, you know, from pulpits across the land that this is a great illustration of the power of prayer.
Yes, and some say it's the pre-incarnate Christ. However, let's take a close look at this one who comes to him. First of all, the 3 weeks of prayer that you mentioned seem to be typical with the prayer that Daniel prayed in chapter 9.
Yes.
And so we have 2 chapters here that's bathed in prayer. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's important for Daniel to be able to understand these things. In fact, when he started praying, the messenger was dispatched to Daniel. But it took him 3 weeks to get there. After 21 days of mourning, ate no pleasant bread, he was fasting. Neither flesh came nor wine in my mouth, neither did I anoint myself at all, for 3 whole weeks fasting and prayer. So on the 24th day of the first month, I was by the side of the great river, which is Hiddekel, and I lifted up my eyes, behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with the fine gold of Uphaz. His body also was like the beryl, and his face is the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. Now I want to stop here and say, Gary, that though this sounds similar to what John saw in Revelation chapter 1, we see him in the attire of the high priest in chapter 1 of Revelation. Here he's clothed in linen. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, this is the attire of people who live in heaven. And so it does not necessarily have to be the same person. In fact, if I were to take a guess as to who this was, I would say it was probably Gabriel, the same one who came to him in chapter 9.
Yeah, Gabriel has visited him before, on 2 occasions really, and for the purpose of giving him understanding. This seems to be Gabriel's role. But here, if Gabriel, we see that his body is like beryl. Beryl is the ore from which the metal beryllium is refined. And it's a beautiful, semi-precious sort of mineral, bluish in color. And it would have to be just a beautiful appearance that he has, with his face looking like lightning, meaning filled with some kind of internal electricity, and his eyes like fire, his arms and his feet like colored brass, polished brass. You know, when we try to visualize this, as impossible as it is, what comes through is enormous power. And the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. You know, Daniel is a very spiritually strong man. And yet Daniel was absolutely turned into total weakness at the very sight of this creature.
You know, it's interesting that we don't have this description of Daniel's weakness in the other encounters with Gabriel.
Yeah, that is interesting.
It's possible that Daniel has an exceptional visitation here. You know, it says a thing was revealed to Daniel whose name was called Belteshazzar. The thing was true. The time appointed was long. He understood the thing. He does not say he was dreaming.
Right.
over here in the others, it appears to me that he's having a vision or a dream when Gabriel comes to him. But here, he must be fully awake.
Fully awake.
And visited by a heavenly being. Now, when the rapture comes, in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, Gary, our bodies are going to be changed to be similar to this body. So, you know, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but it's going to be absolutely incredible when that shout and the trumpet sounds, and all of that comes in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. Poof, we've left this world and we step into eternity. Well, he tells Daniel that he started to come 21 days ago, but that he had a little problem. He says, "For from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. Now I am come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people, the Jews, in the latter days. For the vision is for yet the vision is for many days." So we at least have the setting here for what we're about to hear. Go ahead.
Well, what's fascinating about this is you go back to the beginning of this chapter. It's in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia.
Yes.
Cyrus is on the throne. And yet this heavenly messenger comes, and he says, "The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me for 21 days, and Michael came to help," and he says, "I remained there with the kings," plural, "of Persia." All of this is while Cyrus, the earthly king of Persia, is on the throne.
Earthly king, you say?
Yeah.
In other words, he's talking about some kind of entity in another dimension who's trying to control events in Persia. Spiritual advisor to the king, maybe. What are we talking about, a demon here?
You know, I think we may be talking about an angelic hierarchy on the dark side, if you will. Perhaps demons, and they're controlling fallen angels who report to Satan. But it appears that behind the scenes, the political scene of things that happen here on earth, there is yet another political scene behind the veil, in another dimension, in which politics are being played out on a very high level indeed.
You know, Gary, when we looked at chapter 8 and we saw Antiochus Epiphanes, and it says he waxed great even to the host of heaven and cast down some of the hosts and the stars to the ground. We were looking to the far future, to the Antichrist. This is the same kind of spiritual warfare that goes on, that affects things on earth, isn't it? So, do you think perhaps demons still work in political circles today? Yes, they do. And I think we are seeing that more than ever in the world today, as politicians are pulling the world into a one-world government, a one-world economy, and a one-world religion. The United Nations is sponsoring this thing, and it is moving very quickly now to establish one-world government. And the politicians themselves probably do not fully know what's coming off, do they?
That's right.
They are pawns in the game of spiritual entities.
And so what we have here is one of the most intimate glimpses in the entire Bible of what goes on behind the scenes, things happening. You know, I'm reminded of events in that region of the world. If you do any studying of history, J.R., you get a real sense, particularly in the Middle East, in the Mesopotamian area, that the demons were having a big old time controlling men on earth. And I believe that this is just a little example of what goes on. Mm-hmm. But you notice here, he says to Daniel, "I'm here to make thee understand," again, just like the words of Gabriel before, "what shall befall thy people in the latter days." That's the important sentence right there.
Yes, it is. Now, let me just digress for just a moment to set this thing up. Daniel says that he prayed for 21 days. This follows chapter 9 and the abomination of desolation. Is it possible that between the 69th and 70th week, there's going to be 2,000 years or 20 centuries? Do we see maybe a reference to it here?
It's possible.
We'll be back in just a moment. It is quite possible that Gabriel came to see Daniel, but this time Daniel didn't have a dream or a vision. He was confronted with his heavenly messenger in real life, and it shocked him. It scared the living daylights out of him. He just crumbled. And then, of course, he put his hand on him, set me upon my knees and upon the palms of my hands. Verse 11, he said unto me, Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee, and stand upright. For unto thee am I now sent. And when he had spoken this word unto me, I stood trembling. My, this must have been an experience. So he tells Daniel that he set out to come 3 weeks earlier, but that because of a conflict with the prince of Persia, he was delayed, and Michael had to come to his rescue, and that Michael was still there fighting with the prince of Persia, this demonic entity, and when he gets through with Daniel, he's going to have to go back and help finish the fight.
Indeed.
Now, Gary, let's discuss then the message that he has. He says in verse 14, Now I am come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days.
The latter days. You alluded a moment ago to the fact that this vision was a 21-day vision, and perhaps that interval, 20, 21 days, might be lengthened out or imagined as centuries, in which case you're looking at a long period of time.
Does this perhaps also mean that there's been a heavenly warfare going on for the past 2,000 years?
I believe for that and longer, as a matter of fact. When missionaries went to India for the first time, they went to one of the cities in a southwestern province of India was called Barisal. And the missionaries reported hearing what they thought was the sound of cannons in the air day after day after day, and they never saw anyone on the ground with cannons. And they concluded that there was some kind of heavenly warfare going on. It was common to refer to these as the Barisal guns of India, a heavenly warfare going on back and forth between factions in the heavens. And it was very common for the missionaries to believe there was a heavenly war going on over their heads. Well, I don't doubt that a bit. That part of the world is demon infested, as we know, and I have no doubt that that war is going on behind the scenes.
Amazing. You know, Gary, just in passing, this chapter has 21 verses, and in verse 10, a hand touches me. You know, that sounds alphabetic, doesn't it? 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Yod, stands for hand. And then we get to verse 16, he said, I opened my mouth and spake. So, you know, there's something there, it looks like, that perhaps needs even further attention. But let's discuss now that he touches the lips. Daniel opens his mouth and spake, and said unto him that stood before me, O my Lord, by the vision my sorrows are turned upon me, and I have retained no strength. For how can the servant of this my Lord talk with this my Lord? For as for me, straightway there remained no strength in me, neither is there breath left in me. Then there came again and touched me, one like the appearance of a man, and he strengthened me. And he said, O man greatly beloved, fear not. Peace be unto thee, be strong, yea, be strong. And when he had spoken unto me, I was strengthened, and said, Let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me. So Daniel's having quite an experience here. He's having a difficulty even being able to breathe.
Well, you know, if you're visited by an angel, it's not a light thing. Apparently, it's an incredibly uncommon and extremely serious encounter that involves awe of the highest degree. You know, the next verse, verse 20, then said he, knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee? And now I will return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I'm gone forth, lo, the prince of Grecia shall come. There it is again, Persia and Greece. These are two of the great empires. The Persian Empire, which overthrew the Babylonian Empire, to be followed by the Grecian Empire. The implication is that the fight will go on through the Persian Empire, on into the Grecian Empire, probably into the Roman Empire later on, and it's going on today.
So his battle here would referred to years to come.
It did.
The last verse here, but I will show thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth, and there is none that holdeth with me in these things, but Michael, your prince. Now that's interesting. Michael is the prince for Daniel. In a larger sense, the prince that stands for Israel. So Michael is the one given charge over the nation of Israel, is the way I take it. And the interesting thing is, this angel, perhaps Gabriel, we don't know for sure, but he has come to tell Daniel what's going to happen to the Jewish people. And he lets him know that Michael is his prince and helping take care of all of this and maneuver the situation. He goes on to say in chapter 11, verse 1, I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. I think what he's saying here is, Daniel, 4 years ago, when Darius came to power, I stood there with him, and it was I who saw to it that he was able to rise to the position that he had.
And then he says, and now will I show thee the truth. And he then launches into a prophecy concerning Persia and Greece. So it's very obvious that Daniel is being prepared to receive a message. And the message, of course, comes in chapter 11, which is yet to come, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, so chapter 10 here sets up the message, but the message is given in chapter 11. And the message, of course, deals with what I think is verse 27 of chapter 9, the rise of the Antichrist. And of course, we have seen that in chapters 8 and chapter 9, and now in chapter 10. All of this is zeroing in, pointing to the man of sin that would rise one day and take over the world for 7 years and try to make himself to be Christ. This, the background, the family lineage, the bloodline of the Antichrist, I think is the main subject of all of these chapters, all the way through chapter 12.
You know, in the minute, did you have something else to add?
No, go ahead.
In the minute or two remaining here, I want to go back to Daniel chapter 9 and just mention something that's fascinating in the context. And that is, in the prophecy of the 70 weeks, we saw that after 62 weeks, Messiah would be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The coming prince is clearly the Antichrist. His people are Titus and Vespasian, in other words, Rome.
Yes.
And so from this indicator alone, we know that from Rome will come the Antichrist. Now the Jews speak of a perfidious leader who will rise in their future, and they call him Rome, but they also refer to him in other ways. And the fascinating thing is that though he is Rome, and by extension, all of the leaders of Europe, the royal bloodline of Europe, we also know that he comes out of Alexander the Great. So how do we put all this together? Well, that's the message. In fact, that's exactly what the angel came to tell Daniel. Here's how it all fits together.
And that's what we're going to see in chapter 11 on our next program. The interesting thing here, of course, is that the details deal primarily between Syria and Egypt until we finally see this man, this vile person, stand up in the estate, the Antichrist, and take the kingdom. Well, don't miss the next program. I think you'll certainly want to hear the details of chapter 11 as we're moving now toward the conclusion of our study in the book of Daniel. If you don't know Christ as your Savior, trust Him today. He alone can give you eternal life. We'll be back in just a moment.